You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, we're reviewing match number 17 of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England, and a comprehensive victory in the end by Australia with both bat and ball. They were dominant, crushing England and England's hopes of potentially winning this T20 World Cup for 2024. And as I said, it was a very clinical performance by a very good Australian team, which showed everyone in this game that they are one of the favourites to win this tournament. And we certainly saw that with their performance in this match, as we'll talk about in this review. Whereas with England, on the other hand, their T20 World Cup hopes are in tatters, you will have to say. Their batting and bowling was all over the place in this game, and they weren't up to the task. Plain and simple, weren't up to the task, and they may not qualify for the Super 8s with this loss. They needed to win this game against Australia to, pretty much set them on the path of qualifying for the Super 8s, which is the next stage of this tournament. But unfortunately, with the way they played in this game, you would think that's going to be a tall order. But there's still a lot of cricket to be played until we reach the Super 8 stage. At the end of the group stage, we will ultimately see whether or not England have qualified or not. But as I said, a very disappointing performance by England. Below par, they'll be disappointed. They weren't at their best with bat and ball in this game. And Australia were just far too good. So plenty to unpack from this game between Australia and England, plenty to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's have a look at the match summary from match number 17 of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England from the Kensington Oval. And Australia batted first, made 7 for 201 from their 20 overs, which was a commanding total, and it proved to be too much for England in the end. David Warner top scored with 39, and Chris Jordan took 2 wickets for England. England needed 202 runs to win. They finished on 6 for 165 from their 20 overs. The captain, Jos Buttler, top scored with 42. Pat Cummins and Adam Zampa took 2 wickets each for Australia. Australia won by 36 runs, and Adam Zampa was named player of the match. What were the key moments and key factors from match number 17 of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England? Well, the David Warner and Travis Head opening partnership of 70 was key to set the tone for Australia's batting, to set them up to get that score of 7 for 201, which was a match-winning score in the end. That partnership, Warner and Head, took down England in that power play, set the tone and set the intent for the Australian batting, and really put England on the back foot. That was a key moment which England didn't capitalise on, and Australia did, and they were able to pretty much control the rest of the innings from that power play. And then obviously Adam Zampa breaking the opening partnership of 73 between Buttler and Salt was a key moment in the run chase. Buttler and Salt were looking good. The Australian bowlers didn't quite get it right in the power play early on, but Adam Zampa was going to be key on a surface in Bridgetown that was taking turn, a little bit of slowness in the surface and also taking a bit of spin. He was going to be the key bowler for Australia to try and break it open, and that's what he did. He broke the opening partnership, and that pretty much started the batting decline for England from then on in. And that was a key pivotal moment in the run chase for Australia to really wrestle the momentum back in their favour. So those were the key moments and key factors from match number 17 of this ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England. Let's talk about how both Australia and England performed in this match, and talk about their performances overall with bat and ball. And let's start with the Australian team and talk about their performance in this match against England. And let's start with the batters and talk about their performance in this match overall. It was a very clinical batting performance from Australia. Scoring 7 for 201 from the 20 overs indicated and showed that it was a pretty clinical, dominant performance with the bat. The Warner and Travis Head opening partnership of 70 set up Australia's innings and capitalised in the power play, scoring 2 for 74 from the 6 overs, and pretty much feasted on what was pretty much poor bowling from England. And also Mitchell Marsh and Glenn Maxwell added 65 for the 3rd wicket, which also helped in Australia's efforts to get that score well over 200 plus. So those 2 partnerships were pretty much the key in propelling Australia to what was a very competitive and dominant total. No one really scored any big scores. You have a look at the batting order: Head 34, Warner 39, Marsh 35, Maxwell 28, Stoinis 30, David 11, Matthew Wade 17 not out. So there weren't any big scores. No one scored a half century. No one scored nearly towards 100 runs. It was pretty much consistency in terms of the scoring. And every time Australia lost a wicket, the new batter coming in would put on a partnership and the momentum of the innings would continue. And I think that's what I liked about Australia's batting, is that it wasn't stop-start. It was pretty much gun-ho, put the foot down, let's just keep going here. We've got England on the back foot. England weren't bowling well. They were slow to adapt to the conditions. It took a long time for England to realise that, hang on, pace on the ball here is not working. Let's just take the pace off a bit. And it sort of worked to their advantage towards the back end of the innings. They were able to keep Australia to 201. It could have been maybe 230 or 240 at one stage with the way Australia were batting. But they kept the momentum up, Australia, throughout the innings. The rhythm and the fluency. Even though no one scored a big score, there were good contributions in the context of how the innings panned out and the way that England were bowling. So I like that from Australia's batting, and looking busy and proactive as well. And that's what you need to do in T20 cricket. You need to keep going, but also mix it in with a bit of cricket smarts as well. And that's what Australia did. They were smart about their batting. They targeted certain bowlers. There was one side of the ground in Bridgetown at the Kensington Oval, which was a short boundary. They targeted that side of the boundary for certain bowlers in the England bowling attack. It was pretty smart batting, you'll have to say. They slowed down towards the back end of the innings, but that's to be expected. Whenever you get off to a good start in T20 cricket, you have a good power play. The middle overs were pretty good from Australia. And then towards the back end, the death overs, they slowed down a little bit. They lost a few wickets. They weren't able to accelerate as they would have liked. But that's to be expected when you are in a very dominant position. You had a good power play. You had a good middle overs. And then towards the back end of the innings, they slowed down a little bit. England picked up a few wickets, but that's to be expected. But nonetheless, 200 plus was a very good score on a surface that you would have thought wasn't a 200-run surface. But, Australia were helped out by some very poor bowling from England, which we'll talk about in a moment when we talk about England's performance. But I think Australia will be pleased about their efforts with the bat in this game. I think from the Oman game, where they struggled a bit rusty, first game of the tournament, you come into the second game against England, and I think they'll be very pleased with how they went about their batting in this game against England. And it's good to see all batters in this side scoring runs, but also doing it in a fashion that is definitely going to put the opposition teams under pressure throughout this tournament. So I think the batting group will be very pleased with their efforts in this match. It was very clinical, full of experience with the batting, very destructive as well with the way that Australia set up their batting lineup. And they'll be pleased about their efforts, no doubt. So the batting for Australia, big tick, was pretty dominant in this match against England. Let's move on, talk about the bowlers for Australia and talk about their performance in this match. And I thought it was a dominant bowling display by Australia. And keeping England to 6 for 165, defending 201, showed that. It showed that they were able to adapt to the conditions a bit quicker than England. It was a slow pitch. Okay. The power play for Australia was a bit expensive. Butler and Salt added 73 for the first wicket, which got England off to a reasonable start. It was a good start in the power play. So they got it wrong in the power play, and England were able to capitalise on that. But after the power play, They were able to adapt to the conditions of the pitch. What's the pitch offering here? Okay, if you bowl pace on, you're going to get dispatched. You take the pace off, you bowl slower balls into the surface, you bowl the ball into the surface, bowl cutters, variations, slower balls. It's going to be difficult for the batters to force the pace on the ball. And that's what happened to the England batters. They weren't able to generate pace off the ball because Australia were able to adapt to the conditions, and they changed up their deliveries. They weren't the same, Australia. They didn't bowl the same ball every ball. They changed it up. They bowled well to their plans and fields, and that's why the England batters struggled. And Adam Zampa, who was obviously awarded the player of the match, and rightly so, 2 wickets, 2 important, crucial wickets. And Adam Zampa was going to be a key bowler for Australia, not only in this match against England, but for the entirety of the T20 World Cup as well. In these conditions in the Caribbean, where pitches are slow and turning, he was going to play a pivotal role for Australia in this bowling attack. And he showed why he's one of the best limited overs spinners in the game right now. He came on after the power play. Buttler and Salt were going well for England, none for 73. So England had some hope of chasing down this mammoth score. And then come Adam Zampa, he removes Phil Salt, who played a lazy shot, angled bat, chopped onto, missed it altogether and got clean bowled. And then Buttler played a reverse sweep, hit it straight to backward point. And that's pretty much the door opening for Australia and pretty much where England went downhill with their batting. And Adam Zampa just changed it in the matter of a couple of overs. He bowled really well, and that's good to see from him. He had a pretty good 50-over World Cup last year and contributed to Australia winning that. But also, this bowling performance against England showed why that he's a valuable asset to have in this Australian team. And he showed that. He pretty much broke the door open for Australia. And Australia were able to squeeze England after that with the slower balls and change-ups. And England just didn't look comfortable with the bat at all because the pitch was proving to be a bit difficult with the slowness of the surface. Apart from that, the other bowlers, Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins, bowled well. They did their roles. Stark had a bit of an expensive day with the ball, but, he did his role in parts. Cummins, first game of the tournament for him after being rested from the Oman game. He bowled well, 2 wickets for 23. Hazelwood doing what he does always, very economical. And also good to see Marcus Stoinis contributing as well. Picked up another wicket today in this game against England. Obviously picked up 3 wickets in the last game against Oman. And also Glenn Maxwell bowled a couple of overs, which went for 22. But nonetheless, all the Australian bowlers did their role and played to their roles and executed their roles and were able to put England under immense pressure. So I think Australia will be very pleased that the bowling is starting to come together. Everyone's contributing. Everyone's looking good. And I think they'll be pleased about this performance. It was a very clinical bowling performance. They should be very happy with how things went in this game. Are there areas to improve on? Absolutely. But, they had a pretty good middle over phase where they kept England pretty much scoreless, really. Not too many boundaries were hit by England in that middle over phase. And then towards the back end of the innings, they picked up wickets and pretty much put the foot down. So they'll be pleased Australia, I should say, about this bowling performance, as well as the batting performance as well. And the team performance overall was a pretty good team performance by Australia. It was very clinical, just showing the rest of the tournament why Australia are the favourites to win. And in this game against England, it was a very clinical performance, you have to say. It was just a clinical performance with bat and ball. The fielding was good as always. There were a few missed catches and drop catches here and there, but other than that, Australia will be very pleased with how things are ticking over. And going forward for the remainder of the tournament, they'll be pleased that they've started on the right note. So that's Australia's performance in this match. A bit of a summary there. We move on and talk about England's performance in this match against Australia. And first of all, we'll talk about the England batters and how they went about their business in this game against Australia. Well, you have to say it was a below par batting performance by England. Chasing 201 was always going to be difficult, scoring 6 for 165 in the end from their 20 overs, which wasn't a bad result. That's not a bad total when you're chasing 200. But when you're chasing 201, you have to go from the word go. You're always up against it with the run rate. You have to match it, and they did. That opening power play, Buttler and Salt really got England off to a very good start. And you would have thought, hang on, if they can bat it for another couple of overs after the power play, take this partnership deep, then they would have been a good chance of chasing the runs down. But Buttler and Salt added 73 for the opening wicket. But once they got out, once Adam Zampa came on, got rid of Buttler and Salt, the rest of the batting faltered, really. They lost wickets at regular intervals, didn't establish any partnerships of any note, found it difficult to time the ball against the Australian bowlers, bowling it into the surface, slower balls, cutters, taking the pace off, which made it difficult for England and their batters to really time the ball and find the boundary, which you needed to do when you're chasing 200. You need to do that. And they found it difficult. They struggled. And it showed in their batting really after that. And it showed that the surface probably wasn't a 200-run surface anyway, but they've only got themselves to blame, England. They gave Australia a 201 head start, which pretty much cost them in the end. And their batting faltered because of that. So there's plenty of work to do for the England batters going into the next game against Oman and then Namibia after that for England, which they need to win, obviously, to try and qualify for the Super 8s. So they're under immense pressure because of that. So just going back on their batting once more, just found it difficult, really, and just didn't get going. No fluency, no momentum, no energy, no intent. They looked a bit, all over the place a little bit, unsure about how we should approach this, which, definitely for Buttler as captain and definitely Matthew Mott as the coach of England, we'll be definitely asking the batters about that going into the next couple of games. How can we improve that? So there's a lot of work to do for the England batters, but below par batting performance, not quite what we expect from this England side. We move on, talk about the bowling quickly about England and their performance in this match. Just like the batting, it was a below par bowling performance. Conceding 201 indicated that. And probably this pitch here in Barbados, here in Bridgetown, probably wasn't a 200-plus wicket, given how slow the surface was, and given that the other games being played here in the tournament thus far have indicated that it has been a slow surface. It's taken a bit of turn, not really that easy for batters to score freely. But in this game, England were all over the shop with the ball. They were slow to adapt to the conditions. They bowled pace on. Archer and Wood, who bowled express pace. What happened? Both of them went for runs. Mark Wood went for 10 runs and over. Archer went for 7 runs and over, which indicated that you bowl pace on, you were going to get punished. And we saw that in the power play with David Warner and Travis Head. They feasted on that. And they made England pay because of that. And they were slow to adapt. Okay, pace on, not working. Let's take the pace off, bowl slower balls, cutters into the surface, make the Australian batters force the pace with the bat. Because, many of the Australian batters, they like pace on. They come from Australia where wickets are fast and bouncy. They love bat on ball. They love the pace onto the ball. You take the pace off, it's going to be difficult for batters to time the ball and do all that stuff. But they were slow to adapt. They didn't recognize that. The tactics were wrong. The strategy was wrong. Will Jacks bowling the second over of the power play. He went for 22 in 1 over. That was the second over of the match. And Buttler said, right, okay, I'll bowl Moeen Ali. You expect that from any captain at a T20 match. The reason you bowl a spinner in the first 6 overs of a power play in a T20 match is probably just to get 1 over of spin out of the way early and then have your options open for your other bowlers. But he went with, after Moeen Ali in that first over, he went with Will Jackson the second over, which backfired immensely. 22 off that over that Jacks bowled. And then England were chasing the game from then on in. Warner and Head feasted on anything that was not executed with the line and length from England, and they just punished the England bowlers. And England's bowling was all over the place. It's looking a little bit lackluster in these conditions in the Caribbean. The first game against Scotland, their bowling was mediocre. This game against Australia, the same. It was lackluster. They didn't take wickets early in the power play. They got 2 wickets in the power play. But already the damage was already done. Australia were already 70-odd after the power play for 2 wickets down. The platform was already set. The foundation was set for the other batters like Marsh and Maxwell and Stoinis and David and Wade to come in and finish off the job, and that's what they did. And unfortunately for England, they weren't able to peg it back. They sort of did towards the back end of the innings, where England were able to pick up a few wickets and Australia slowed down a little bit. But Australia already made over 200, and that was a very commanding total, and it proved to be the case. So they've got a lot of work to do, the England bowlers. They've got other bowlers in the wings like Sam Curran, maybe Reece Topley should have played in this game just to change it up a bit, because I don't think Archer and Wood, both of them who bowl pace, should probably play in this team. And that's the problem that England had in this game. Mark Wood, we saw in the 50-over World Cup last year, he went for runs. He doesn't have those variations to change up his pace. It's always express pace. As a fast bowler, you need to be adaptable, and you need to realize that certain pitches require you to bowl in a certain way. Some pitches that have good carry and pace and bounce, you bowl fast. Then you change it up with slower balls. But on a slow surface, where batters are finding it difficult to score, you need to change it up, bowl different variations and bowl slower balls, and cutters and Yorkers and all that. And Mark Wood doesn't have that, whereas maybe a Reece Topley and a Sam Curran probably could offer that for England. So there's a lot of questions for England. There's a lot of questions they need to answer with their bowling, their batting, their mindset. It's sort of what happened in the 50-over World Cup last year. The intent, the mindset, the approach. Butler and obviously Matthew Mott as captain and coach are under severe pressure, because many people are asking the questions. Many of the England fans and pundits and experts that cover England cricket are saying that, and saying, this T20 World Cup was going to be different than what happened last year in the 50-over World Cup, where they absolutely had a shocking tournament. The same thing's happening here. Maybe this side is probably aging. Maybe some of their players have stayed in there too long. Maybe it's time to move on and probably see other players beyond this tournament. But that's to come after the tournament. And I think for England now, they've got to look back on this game and say, yeah, we didn't bat well. We didn't bowl well for a start. We leaked too many runs. And that was plain and simple. Leaked too many runs. And then we're chasing the game after that. So a lot of work to do for England with bat and ball, and also for the last 2 games of the tournament, which they really need to get a bit of a move on. If they don't, it could be trouble for England, and probably not qualifying for the next stage of the tournament, which is the Super 8. So let's see what England can do in the last 2 games of the group stage. But plenty of work to do with bat and ball. And it was really a below par performance by England in this game against Australia. My final thoughts for this match between Australia and England before we end our review of this game between Australia and England in this T20 World Cup. My final thoughts. A good win by Australia. It was a clinical performance, a dominant performance, showed why they're one of the favourites to win the tournament. They were very good with bat and ball, everyone hitting their straps at the right time. They've started this tournament well. They look pretty good. They look capable of winning the whole tournament, and absolutely destroyed England in this game. So Australia's next game is against Namibia, and that will be on Wednesday at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium, which is in Antigua. You would think Australia would go in as favourites for that game against Namibia. Obviously, Namibia coming off a 5-wicket loss to Scotland. And for Namibia, they won only just the one game in this tournament. That was against Oman for their first game. So Australia go in as favourites for that game against Namibia. It's going to be the first time that Australia and Namibia have played each other for more than 20 years in international cricket, obviously going back to 2003 where they first met in the Cricket World Cup, which was in South Africa. We all know that game that Australia played Namibia in. Obviously, Glenn McGrath picked up 7 wickets and Australia made light work of Namibia. But it's good to see both of the countries playing against each other again 20 years later, and for the first time in a T20 World Cup and the first time in a T20 International as well. So no doubt Namibia will be up for the challenge. They know that it's going to be difficult up against a red-hot Australian team who are playing really good cricket at the moment. So that's Australia's next assignment going into the next game for them in this group stage. Just my thoughts on England to conclude. It was a below-par performance by England with bat and ball, as we've mentioned throughout this review, and they need to improve quickly. Their next game is against Oman. That will be on the 14th of June. That will be also in Antigua at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium. They need to win and beat Oman to boost their net run rate. And they also need to do the same thing in their last game against Namibia, which will follow the Oman match for England. And they hope that Scotland net run rate against Australia in their last game, which Scotland will play Australia in their last game, hoping that Australia beats Scotland and their net run rate goes down, and obviously England will go through and qualify. But that's not a certainty. Scotland have been playing some good cricket in this group stage, and I don't think that will be the case. It could be, may not. We'll have to wait and see. But for England, their World Cup qualification hopes for the Super 8s and going on to win back-to-back T20 World Cups are certainly in tatters after this performance against Australia. They're capable of beating Oman and Namibia, and you would think they should do that quite convincingly. But based on what we've seen thus far, the game against Scotland and the game against Australia, it doesn't bode well for them in terms of dominant performances against Oman and Namibia. But we'll have to wait and see what they do and how they, respond. It's important that they respond in a way that is, going to make sure that they hit the ground running and obviously get back to playing some good cricket, because we know from England they are capable of playing some good cricket. We haven't seen that in this tournament thus far. We didn't see that in the 50-over World Cup last year. So they've got some work to do, England, going into the last 2 games of the tournament for them in the group stage, that is, in order to qualify for the Super 8s. But overall, their performance in this match was very poor and below par, and they've got plenty of work to do going forward. Thanks, everyone, for listening or watching our review of match number 17 of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on match number 17 of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and England. In the comments, we would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.